An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds! Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 114. I'm Aaron Pollier.
And I'm Darlene.
And we are alternating between doing, at least for now, doing science fiction and
Hammer
films, because in a lot of ways, Hammer horror, or at least horror from this era,
does
in general.
monsters.
They do monsters, and monsters is a big part of science fiction. And so we decided that we were going to do the Gorgon.
But before that, we were going to do the Old Dark House. And we found out it was a remake from a 1932.
With Boris Karloff, right?
With Boris Karloff.
So we were not going to do that. We're going to watch the original because we have said many times that we actually would much rather do originals, the original versions of things, than remakes. And fair enough. So we went on to do the Gorgon from 1964, and boy, oh boy, does it have star power in it. It has star power. So before we get into the actual plot, we're gonna talk about the stars that are in this. We have Christopher Lee as Professor Carl Meister. Christopher Lee, you might know as Sauron from Lord of the Rings. He's also Scaramanga from Man with the Golden Gun. He has been in everything. He is in many Hammer horror films. He is fantastic. He's the cousin of Ian Fleming, who wrote James Bond. Like, this guy, yeah, he has star power, right? Our second character, which I'm actually surprised he has second billing, but it's because of his star power, is Peter Cushing as Dr. Namaroff. Peter Cushing you might know as Grand Moff Tarkin, or Doctor Who from the two Doctor Who movies. He is also in many of these Hammer films. Peter Cushing, when he is on screen, has charisma. The other person that I really appreciated seeing in this, and it gave me great joy, is kind of far down on the cast list, but it's Patrick Troughton as Inspector Canoff. And Patrick Troughton, we have not really talked about before on this show, but Patrick Troughton played the second Doctor on Doctor Who. He was the first person to ever play the character after William Hartnell, who decided to leave the role, and they had to come up with the whole idea of regeneration, and William Hartnell's Doctor became Patrick Troughton's Doctor. And Patrick Troughton, I have not seen in many things. He is actually in a lot of things outside of Doctor Who, but I have not seen them. So seeing him in a role outside of Doctor Who is both strange and wonderful.
And playing one of the villainous characters, kind of.
Yeah, and he is fantastic. Barbara Shelley is in this as the leading lady, and she plays Carla Hoffman. She has been in tons of things. I don't have them all listed in front of me, but I know that we have spoken about her before. She's in Quatermass, and we've talked about Quatermass, but we haven't reviewed Quatermass.
Did we ever do the Village of the Damned?
We haven't done Village of the Damned, but she is in Village of the Damned. Village of the Damned is one of those movies that I think
we did The Damned.
Yeah, we did The Damned. Village of the Damned is one of those movies that I feel that we need to do as a one of our 5 or 10s, because it's a classic. Anyway, she has star power in this because she was like a model before she became an actress, and she's actually a very good actress. It's one of those crossovers. Like it sometimes goes the other way, where you're an actress first and then you'll go to a model because you've gotten all this exposure as an actress and people like you because of your charisma, so you've become a model. It's more rare for a model to go and become an actress because usually
Marilyn Monroe.
Yes, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm saying it's a little more rare because in general the skill sets are a bit different. Like, you don't need to be able to act properly in roles to be a model who is just there to look pretty. But as an actress, sometimes you do need to look pretty and be able to act. So it's rarer to go from being a model to an actress.
I like the person who played the Professor Jules
Heinz?
Yes.
But
I've never heard of him.
There's like 3 Heinz characters in this film, and I sometimes got them their names confused. I knew who they were. There's like the original brother Heinz, there's the father Heinz, and then there's the second brother Heinz.
Okay, this is the timeline of the movie. I will go with that. There is the first full moon is the death of Bruno Heinz.
Why don't we talk about the plot first before we go into the details? Yeah, there's timelines in this.
That gives you the character crap.
Okay.
The second full moon is the death of Professor Julius Heinz. And then the third full moon is the aging of Paul Heinz, which is his brother, Bruno's brother. Julius is their father.
You say it's aging, it's not, but we'll get into that.
Okay, his hair goes totally gray.
It goes gray because of fear, I think. Okay. So the Gorgon, as you can tell, is from the name, it's a tale about a Medusa. Okay, it is not about Medusa, it's about a Fury who they mistake for a Gorgon, because the name they give is actually a classical name, but it's one of the Furies, not one of the Gorgons. Anyway.
This movie is 83 minutes long.
Sure, it's in color.
It's 150,000 pounds budget.
Okay, so it's pretty damn good. It's got a good budget.
It was released October 18th of 1964.
Yeah, and then it was later it was early in the next year in the US that it was released. So before we get into the plot, there's going to be some general observations that we should do that are a part of almost every single Hammer film, that we can just get them out of the way.
The matte paintings.
The matte paintings are gorgeous, right?
Yes.
The production value is very good. The sets are well done. Very well done. The props, fantastic. I mean, again, Hammer horror brings it. We've already gone over this, and I'm going to say it at the beginning of every Hammer horror review before we get into the plot. Look, if you're going to watch a Hammer horror film, expect to have a visual treat. It might not be the best plot, but at the very least, you're going to be entertained with what you see, because all the little pieces that are on screen look very good.
They do the Chekhov's gun, though, too. Which
they set things up.
I get mad when they focus on something, and we've had this several times. Focus on something, and it never comes into play again.
You're like, why are they focusing so much time on this one thing and it never pops up again? Yeah, I know. They don't do that in this film. And then, of course, since we have all the star power, the charisma is on the screen. Even if the characters are being either evil or they're supposed to be playing a reserved character, the fact is, like Peter Cushing's character in this is a fairly reserved character, but every time he's on screen, your eyes are on him.
Well, I was also going to say about the Chekhov's gun thing.
Okay.
It's not always in your face that it comes into play. The mirror wasn't in your face. It was in the background.
They do look at it a couple times. I mean, they do clearly, characters clearly focus on it, so you focus on it as the viewer. But it's not bad. It's not
what
over.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not none of these small little things that come into play later, even in the movie previous to this, does it glare at it.
No.
But then we have movies that glare at something, and you're like, when is this going to come back and play? And then you get the end, and you're like, huh?
Yeah. So this is, like I said, this is a tale about the Gorgons, the basically what Medusa was. That there is a creature that's been cursed to turn people into stone that gaze upon them.
Wasn't the Greek one they were so beautiful that they made them ugly so you couldn't look upon them?
It's something like that.
And Medusa was one of the 3 sisters?
I know enough about Greek mythology to be dangerous, and that's about. So I don't want to like talk at length about it because I do know that the name that they use for the Gorgon here is not one of the Gorgons. It's a Fury. It's one of the Furies. Anyway,
well,
let's begin. The credits are over a very beautiful matte painting of a castle, a castle on a ridge, and it turns out that its name is Castle Borsky, and it overlooks a village. And we are told in this like text roll that death reigns in the castle, and it sometimes stalks the land around the castle. Okay,
and this is Central Europe, 1910.
It's 1910
in the village of Vandolph.
Okay. So we actually have kind of a nice scene at the beginning that I thought was going to be really kind of skeevy, but it turned out not to be. And there's a man who is sketching a topless woman. We do not see her topless. We see paintings of her topless, sketches of her topless.
It's
but
always
it is
to the back.
The sketches on the wall? Are you crazy? There's like
the
5...
paintings are of her back.
No, they are not. There is one painting that is very large that is from the back. But there are sketches all over the walls.
Now, this is one of the things that I will say was kind of bad, is it's different styles of paintings and drawings and stuff.
All the sketches look like they were from the same artist. Because it's all the same woman.
But the paintings don't.
No, I think the paintings were a collection. Anyway, let's go to what's happening in here. We have a man who is sketching a woman who is topless. We do not see anything. This is a Hammer horror film, not a skin flick. We see her from the back. We're not even seeing butt. We're just seeing her naked back. Okay? And he is going to marry her. Like, she starts crying.
Ask about it.
She's been clearly asking about it. And he says, I'm going to marry you once I'm able to pay off some debts and put some money in the bank. Because I do love you, but I don't want to disrespect the situation. Like, and I guess I can get that. And then she says, understand.
We need to get married now.
We need to get married now. And he's like, why? Well, I'm pregnant with your baby. Okay. And the thing is the guy doesn't get scared. He's just like, okay, I'm going to go talk to your father because I'm going to make sure he understands I'm going to do the right thing.
And she's afraid of him going to her father because
her father might hurt him. And I'm like, okay, so the guy is trying to be like upfront about this, that if he's going to go confront her father in this time, and I'm making an assumption here because this is not talked about in the film, if he is going to go confront the father, it means he's likely, and he says, I'm going to do the right thing, it means he's going to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. I think this guy's like, he figured out, okay, look, I probably shouldn't have had sex with her, but I do love her. I'm going to marry her. I screwed up. We screwed up. And I'm going to marry her. So he runs off into the night. We find out that this guy is named Bruno Heights. Okay, and this is the first Heights brother that we already talked about. And Bruno says, he runs out of the house, and it takes a little bit for this girl, and I don't even remember her name.
She's got to put on her...
Sasha?
Sasha.
I think it's Sasha.
Like Sasha.
Okay, Sasha. I don't care.
Case.
Does not matter.
I know that her last name
She's
is
only
Case.
in this first scene. Sasha takes a little bit to get dressed because obviously she's been nude for this sketching. So she chases after him. And she gets a little lost in the dark because it's dark outside and there's clouds. We see the moon coming out from behind the clouds and, you know, it lights up a little bit and she looks around and she just screams. She like claws at her eyes and screams. And boom, we just kind of skip to the next scene. We know that she has seen something. We don't know what has happened. We're at a medical institution where we are introduced to Peter Cushing's character, Dr. Nemiroff. I'll always say just Nemiroff or whatever, because that's a vodka we liked from Ukraine. There's a body being brought into the lab for him to examine.
To do an autopsy on. And how does he do an autopsy on?
Well, we don't do an autopsy on it. And that's kind of the point. But the thing is, we're also introduced to Patrick Troughton's Inspector Canoff here. And the inspector, to sum up this scene, we have Barbara Shelley's Carla Hoffman introduced as like the assistant to Peter Cushing's character. The inspector has clearly been investigating multiple deaths in this region that are very similar to this. And we're like, okay, well, that's interesting. And as they're bringing the body in, like a hand, like an arm swings out from underneath this gurney or whatever and hits the floor and it shatters like stone. So
It's
yes,
a finger.
a hand comes out and it shatters. Yeah, it's a finger that's laying off by itself. So we understand. I have tons of detail about these scenes because, like almost every Hammer film, just a second, Darlene, like almost every Hammer film, there is a ton of little detail in dialogue that does not matter much. Now, what were you going to say? I have tons of detail, and I just don't want to talk about the tons of detail.
I was going to say that's when Carla sees it and screams.
She screams, but it's at the same time as like another
character that is insane.
Insane. She screams, so it kind of like
That's
blends
Martha
together
or something.
And she doesn't really matter at all. Even though she's like in 3 or 4 scenes, it's weird because I think what the movie is trying to do, and I'm sorry for
you.
Well, okay, I am going to get away from the plot here, but I think that the movie is trying to confuse us as to maybe she's the Gorgon. I never thought that. You know, I didn't spoil myself. I've never seen this movie before, but I didn't spoil myself by going and looking at details. I'm just like, it doesn't make sense that she's the Gorgon because Gorgons have snake for hair. Like, she's not a snake person. How could she be a Gorgon? Now, that thought is proven wrong later on.
Yep.
But the point is that they... Since the movie was trying to set up confusion about who the Gorgon is, and no one has like this whole idea about possession of spirits later on, until later on in the film, them trying to confuse you about who the Gorgon is, because it's very clear that the Gorgon is real. People are being turned into statues. Why are you trying to confuse us with somebody that no one would think is the Gorgon anyway, because she's human?
And it turns out that there's been 7 murders in the last 5 years.
Which seems low, but I guess okay, because it comes across as the inspector thinks it's a real serious problem that's occurring like almost every month. That's what it comes across as. There are problems in this film.
And Bruno is found.
Bruno's found. Yeah, they go out and look for him because they did find Sasha's body obviously is stoned and was brought in, and they are thinking that Bruno murdered her. How?
No, I don't think it's that. I think they wanted something to blame.
Well, that was the point.
So they can cover it up.
They're just saying, well, Bruno obviously murdered her. And so everyone's just kind of looking at each other and shrugging and going, yeah, I guess Bruno murdered her. So we need to go find Bruno. And they go out into the woods, and there's a cool scene with like Patrick Troughton running around, because it's Patrick Troughton. I love seeing him outside of Doctor Who with all these other like with dogs and like other inspectors, and they find Bruno hanging from a tree
with his face just
tore up. Yeah,
we don't even know what happened to him.
No,
we never do.
We don't. And there's a whole inquest. Okay, so what happens next is there's an inquest with a coroner. And we have our cast, well, most of our cast of characters out there that we think is our cast of characters at this point, that are there like testifying about this, what essentially they conclude is a murder-suicide. And it's really, really clear that everyone knows it's not a murder-suicide.
Because the judge even shuts up one person.
Well, it shuts up the Bruno's father who comes in. Bruno's father's like, you people are insane. This was not a murder-suicide. My son is innocent, and I'm going to stay here and prove him innocent.
And who's to say that her father didn't kill him?
Who's to say?
Yeah. Or maybe the crazy woman did. We have no connection. It never comes up how he got killed.
I think, yeah, well, who knows? I don't think he was killed by the Gorgon because he's not stone. But his face is all torn up, so how did that happen? Like, if he would have seen the Gorgon and freaked out, like we see other characters starting to freak out later on when they see the Gorgon, because folks, when characters see the Gorgon in this movie, they don't instantly turn to stone. They slowly
Unless
turn.
you're Sasha Cast.
Not really.
You don't think she turned?
No, that doesn't come across that way at
Oh,
all.
okay.
No, you slowly turn to stone. Even if you look like directly into the Gorgon's eyes, you have hours before.
But then you get these pimple-like weird things on your forehead.
Oh, well, that's clear what that is.
What?
It's the spiritual snakes from the Gorgon's head.
Biting?
Yeah.
But wouldn't there be two instead of just one?
Because it doesn't matter. They're mystical anyway, right? It's like the beams of energy coming from the Gorgon. That's what I got. That's what I understood. But anyway, we don't see that on Bruno. Like it's very possible that the father of Sasha killed him and hung him. And they're just completely covering everything up because A, they've been always covering up the Gorgon murders, but B,
for the last 5 years.
Yeah, but and B, it's a Gorgon murder plus a local girl got pregnant by a foreigner, and the foreigner was killed by a well-respected local. So we're going to cover that up too.
An innkeeper or something like that?
Yeah, he's an innkeeper. But here's the thing that says that the innkeeper isn't evil. Because when they're trying to portray Bruno as an alcoholic in this scene, a violent alcoholic, the father of Sasha's like, no. And they shut him down like right away.
Yeah, that's one of the people that I said they shut him down to prevent.
Because he was going to say no, he's not, because you can see it clearly in his eyes. Good for the actor too, by the way. I don't even know who that actor was, but he's like, no, you guys are full of crap. Sasha, I didn't like Sasha, but he wasn't a violent alcoholic. And why would a violent alcoholic like seemingly hang himself in a way that he couldn't possibly hang himself, because there was no way he could get into the tree like that? Like,
I mean, he was up above the shoulder of the inspector.
So just from that reaction of Sasha's father going, no, he's not a violent alcoholic, makes me think that no, the father didn't murder him. Because if the father murdered him, he'd want to try to like put as much distance between him and the actual murder by blaming Bruno for being a violent alcoholic.
So it puts us to the third person, which would have been that
the crazy lady.
Crazy lady.
And how would the crazy lady kill a full-grown man? And she was like malnourished, right? Because she was a crazy lady in a hospital. How would she tie the noose up in the middle of that tree, kill a full-grown man, and hang him? Like, no, it's not her. I don't know how Bruno got killed. I think it was the Wolfman. I think there's a whole other hammer. See, if I was the writer director for this movie, I would tie this movie into something completely different too. Like, hey, there's this intersection between the Gorgon and like Attack of the Wolfman.
Anyway, let's get back to
yeah. I'm sorry, we're getting.
There is no.
We're just talking here. We're just talking.
So you know, there is no conclusion to this. That's one of the problems. There is no. Excuse me. There is no connection between who killed.
So
the painter.
Dr. Namaroff, who's Peter Cushing, is asked by Bruno's father to assist in discovering what's going on. But it's very clear again that Namaroff's like, no, this was a murder-suicide. And he's like, I want to see my son's body.
Get out of here.
He's like, just get the hell out, and leave town. Just get the hell out. So, Mr. whatever his name is, Paul's father, Mr. Heights, he's at his son's home. Now,
Professor.
Is he a professor?
We have several professors.
Okay, he's a professor. I don't care. It's Mr. Heights, because again, this is he's only in the movie for a little bit again. And I thought he would be a main character through the film, too, which is weird. But Mr. Heights is attacked in his son's home, trying to kill him and burning his house down by like breaking out a window and throwing a Molotov cocktail / torch into the room.
They throw a torch,
but it suddenly spread like there was alcohol all over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, that could be the paint that was maybe on the floor or something.
Who knows? So the cops mysteriously turn up very quickly when this happens. And Patrick Troughton's there like saying, hey, we didn't see who did this.
Even though they passed them.
Yeah. But we'll keep a lookout for them. but understand that I don't have the personnel to make sure you're safe at all times, and we recommend you get the hell out of town. The professor Heights is just like, I'll take that under advisement, but I'm not leaving until I prove my son's innocence. Okay, good man, sir. You're not being scared out by the vengeful villagers who were terrified of the Gorgon and everyone trying to cover up all these murders.
And he's supposed to be a professor of, we find out from Miser,
Okay.
that he's a professor of antiquities.
Yeah, so I think he's the one that puts together it's a Gorgon, but he like misnames it one of the Furies. Anyway, he after the cops leave, he tells his like footman to make a telegram to a Professor Meister, and Professor Meister is played by Christopher Lee in this, so again, star power, as I said earlier. We get the telegram sent, okay, and I'm gonna take a little bit of things out. I'm gonna take some stuff out of sequence here, but the telegram gets sent. We have Professor Meister getting the telegram, and he shows it to Professor Heights' other son, Paul Heights. Okay, and Paul's like, dude, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna help out my father because my brother was innocent. There's no way he would have killed somebody he clearly loved and painted all of these freaking pictures of, and was saving up money to properly marry and to like provide a home for. There's no way that he would just murder her and supposedly turn her into a freaking statue somehow. All right. But what we're going to have is back in Yon Village, we end up having Heights, Professor Heights, hearing like singing.
Yeah, as he was he was studying a legend of Vandorf. That's what the book was.
Okay. He was clearly looking up stuff about like Gorgons. All right.
Or the legends that are taking place at the...
Yeah, exactly. Or like local legends. So he goes out, he climbs up to the castle, which is very close by. It's in disrepair, but still has lots of finery inside. And we later learn that there's all this really expensive stuff still in because the villagers are terrified of going up there. Because of the Gorgon that they're all covering up. All right. So he's wandering around, and he ends up seeing the Gorgon hiding behind curtains. And he sees that it's a woman. He doesn't really see that it's a Gorgon, right? He sees that it's a woman, and he approaches. Because I guess you need to see the snakes in order for all this to happen.
Well, there's a lot of noise going on, and that's what he's investigating. Is because when he started investigating the song.
Yeah.
And then he gets into the castle, and there's movement up.
So, yeah, he gets closer, he screams, covers his face, and runs out, returning back to the house. His footman sees him once he's back there, and he's actually, at this point, mostly stoned. He's breathing. Yeah, he's all, like, gray. He's got these, like, puncture wounds on his forehead. What ends up happening is that he says, look, I'm going to write a note to my son, make sure he gets it. And he writes out this long explanation about what he had seen, and he dies while writing it because he
doesn't finish it.
He does not finish it. He just dies. So Paul arrives and speaks to Dr. Namaroff. And it's clear that he stopped at his brother's house beforehand because he has the letter. And Namaroff is like, I've already inspected his body. He died of heart failure. And Paul is just like, you asshole. We know you're lying. Everyone knows you're lying.
A man with, he even says, a man with a heart attack would not be sitting there writing this letter. And he gives him...
like 3 pages of a letter. You know that as well as I do. Yes, he describes that there's a pain in his chest because his heart is turning to stone. Like, I want to see my father's body. And he's like, sorry, can't do that. Get the hell out. So Paul ends up getting a visitor, and that's Carla Hoffman, and it's Dr. Namaroff's assistant. She wants to help Paul. She wants to help Paul because she knows there's shenanigans afoot. and she's not a native of this village.
No, she's from Germany.
She's from somewhere else.
Well, that's what the paper said in from the.
I guess it doesn't really matter. She's not from here. She's considered a foreigner is all that really matters. And she arrived 5 years earlier.
No, 7.
1905, they said, and it's 1910.
Okay.
So yeah. I mean, that's what I have from this scene. She warns him about the Gorgon, and it's like this local legend that there's a Gorgon. It lives up in the freaking castle, and we get basically a mythos breakdown of what Gorgons are, and we then learn that while Carla and Paul were talking, or like before he had gotten there, she had memorized the letter that Paul's father had written because she saw it on the table.
Well, she was spying for
Nemiroff, and she repeats it all to him, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is a problem. So we end up having a scene where Paul walks outside and sees the reflection of the Gorgon in water and in glass. Now, as we know, if you see a Gorgon, the reflection of a Gorgon, you are not affected by it. And so he's freaking out that there's this Gorgon just kind of standing near him. And he slowly is losing his mind in this scene. He has a complete breakdown, and he just wakes up in a hospital bed.
Yeah, because he's found by the pool. And that's the third. He went to the pool. He saw the Gorgon. He went to run away. He saw the Gorgon in the glass.
Yep.
And then runs back down to the garden and sees the Gorgon again. And that's when he passes out.
Yes. So this is where he gets gray hair, right?
Yes.
All right. So it means that he was somewhat affected by the Gorgon.
So this is the third full moon.
Yes. So Paul tells Dr. Nemiroff, hey, look, I'm staying in town because I'm going to figure out what's going on. I'm going to prove my brother's innocence, and I'm going to prove that you guys have been screwing around and are covering up stuff about my father's death. So Paul that night goes out and digs up the grave of his father and finds that he's a statue inside this coffin. Solid stone. Carlo arrives, and Paul accuses Dr. Nemiroff of falsifying a death certificate because this man clearly didn't die of heart failure. He's a goddamn statue in this coffin. What is wrong with you people? Carla says, like, she doesn't know what the doctor is really hiding here, other than this legend of the Gorgon, and the Gorgon legend seems to line up with these crazy deaths. I mean, that makes sense, right? Paul, during these scenes, because remember, I'm there's lots of little details in these scenes that I'm just kind of trying to pass over because part of Hammer films is the little details to enjoy, but I'm trying to just deal with this overall plot. Paul has been falling in love with Carla while they've been together because there's been multiple scenes of them just talking and sharing little intimate moments. I think it still feels a little rushed, but it's not bad.
But it's not rushed because full moon to full moon.
It's supposed to be months. It's supposed to be months.
He came after his father's death a few days.
Now, but remember, Darlene, the whole idea of it being months doesn't come across unless you understand that the Gorgon only comes out at full moons.
That's why I brought that up in the first.
You need to know that. You need to know that.
Well, the next thing you happen to have is the Professor Miser arrives.
Christopher Lee arrives to speak with Paul, and
and sees that he looks older or gray.
Gray. He has gray hair, and he's like, "There's something wrong." Back at Nemiroff's exam room, he starts to do an autopsy on the crazy woman we've kind of mentioned a few times.
Because she went running off.
Yeah, she went running off, and again, they were trying to imply that she might have been the Gorgon, which at this point was a completely useless, to me, a useless like sidetrack.
And Nemiroff removes her brain.
Yeah, it's another one of these Hammer films with like a lamb brain or a sheep brain. We end up having Carla coming in, and she says she wants to go out on a walk by herself, but Peter Cushing's character is like, no, you need to be followed. So now we kind of understand. He doesn't say that to Carla that she needs to be followed. He calls in one of his assistants to follow her.
Which is that rat off.
Ratoff, played by Jack Watson. See, we actually have I have my list of people here.
I
now.
just remember his name being Ratoff.
So we suddenly kind of start putting two and two together at this point that at the very least, Carla might be the Gorgon. Because we learn that Carla is basically being followed all the time, or she is locked in her rooms during the time of the full moon. And I thought, okay, is this some sort of weird pseudo-Victorian women's monthly problem sort of allegory now? And it really isn't, but it that was a thought that came into my head, and I apologize for that. But can you see that connection?
No.
Because Peter Cushing's character is dealing with this insane asylum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're talking about a pseudo-Victorian, it's post-Victorian, but
it's a medical, not just
it's a medical sanatorium. Because it's a crazy woman. They have crazy people there.
They have some, but they also have medical too.
I just thought it might have been some sort of connection to that, but it's not. It's not.
She's a nurse. She's supposed to be a nurse.
She's supposed to be a nurse. Professor Meister wants to inspect photos and records of all the women that have been coming into the area and have wanted to settle. So he ends up breaking in to Peter Cushing's character's office to get all these files.
Oh, you missed Carla's call to
Okay.
Paul.
Okay.
To meet him at the castle.
Okay.
And he goes and does that.
Yes, he does.
And that's where they kiss.
They do kiss.
And then Professor to help find this Gorgon.
And she wants to help. Paul says, "Let's leave."
Yes.
And she says, "Sure,
but not now."
But not now. Exactly. And when he comes into the castle, she's actually sitting on the throne of this castle, right?
So she's not afraid of the place.
She isn't. No. She just seemingly knows where things are. So it gives you
the question of whether she knows of herself. But
I don't think that.
Professor Meiser stops Ratoff from killing Paul.
When Paul's walking away from the castle.
Yes.
Yeah, because Ratoff tosses a giant Bowie knife at Paul.
Boing!
And it just goes right into a tree. And Meister takes this Bowie knife and he has it for the rest of the movie up until near the end, where he actually confronts Peter Cushing's character with it. And goes, "Why don't you give this back to your lackey who tried to kill Paul the other day?" And Patrick Troughton's inspector comes down and says, "You need to get that knife out of the professor's face, the doctor's face. Otherwise, I'll take you in on attempted murder." Because it's a giant goddamn Bowie knife. Anyway.
But Professor Meiser almost gets caught by Nemiroff when he's going through the files. But he finds out that she has amnesia.
She has reoccurring amnesia that occurs
since 1905.
Since 1905.
But she came in 1903. That's why I said she was there in...
Then it doesn't make sense that the murders have been happening for 7 years either. Because, spoiler, Carla is the Gorgon, and she's only getting amnesia when the Gorgon takes control during the full moons. So if she's only been being treated for amnesia, reoccurring amnesia, for 5 years, that means the murders have only been going on for 5 years with Carla. Now, fair enough, it is also possible that the Gorgon was possessing somebody else beforehand, but they don't really make that very clear at all. It says that the Gorgon has been the Gorgon's body long ago died, and its spirit is roaming. It roamed until it found Carla, and then it was able to manifest through Carla. So we have this big freaking smackdown where, the Paul and Carla are trying to connect. He's wanting to get Carla to leave town on the next train. She doesn't, because the Gorgon's slowly manipulating her brain to keep her here. We have the inspectors looking for Paul because now there's warrants out for the arrest of Paul for kidnapping. And other crap. It's crazy.
And Dr. Nimoff said he was going to do that if he didn't leave Carla alone.
Yeah. And
So it's all a setup there.
yeah, it all is a setup. It's clear that the local authorities are doing everything they possibly can to cover up everything they possibly can, like regardless. And it seems like they're going to ridiculous lengths to do really dumb stuff. Like, anyway, we end up
They'd be better off trying to stop the shit.
We end up having a showdown between Nemiroff and Paul at the castle.
Yes, because Nemiroff was going to try to kill the Gorgon, I guess.
Yeah, because Nemiroff had like this badass sword that he was going to try to
But if you look
like...
around the whole room of that castle, there's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, but who knows? Like, maybe Nemiroff had actually never been up to the castle and
Paul
saw
grabs a
candlestick,
a
candelabra. Yeah, and fights him with this
this iron.
Yeah. And he's able to like knock the sword out of the doctor's hands. And yes, the Gorgon is there kind of looking on. And Dr. Nemiroff ends up seeing the Gorgon and like meeting its gaze, and he screams and turns away. And Paul's like, I can't look. So we understand that Nemiroff, we don't see him. We understand Nemiroff is now dying. He's turning to stone. We just don't need to see it. Paul, he's like trying to not look at her, but he ends up seeing her. He ends up like he unable to look away.
Yes, but behind him creeps up Professor
Meister. And he grabs the sword that Nemiroff dropped that had been tossed from his hand.
And all the snakes are looking towards Paul.
Yeah.
They're movable. I don't think they're the best thing.
They're not the best effect, no.
But it's that.
But like as Paul's like turning to stone, Meister comes up behind the Gorgon and decapitates her. And there's a behind the scenes thing about that. But as Paul's turning to stone, we see the Gorgon's head like dissolve into the decapitated head of Carla. And Paul is like screaming, Carla, I love you. I'm so sorry. And the end. That's it. Now, I'll talk really quickly about that decapitation scene, since I just said, hold on, there's behind the scenes. I guess the actress who played the Gorgon, Prudence Hyman, which, okay. I guess Christopher Lee almost decapitated her for real with that, because she really was there. And he had, I guess somehow Christopher Lee had slipped a little bit, and that sword really was coming at her full speed, and like an assistant grip tackled her out of the way and saved her life, because it was like not
well, that makes sense of why it got cut so
in a weird way, because that was the take. Like Christopher Lee really was coming in, and I guess he didn't meet, like it was clearly an accident. He didn't really want to kill Prudence Hyman, but yeah, seriously, a woman almost died in that shot. So the plot is a little confusing. Okay, no, it is confusing at times. It's also very simple at its core. There's a monster, it's killing somebody.
The townspeople are covering it up.
There's just lots of like one family that keeps coming in and being killed. And every time you think you have the main character for the movie, that main character kind of gets killed. Is this movie... Well, let's talk about what works. We've already said, like every Hammer film, I'll cover it really quick. The sets are fantastic. The props are fantastic. The costuming is fantastic. The lighting is fantastic.
They Kirk-light somebody.
Oh, they Kirk-light people. You know, that band of light across their eyes, folks. That's what we call the Kirk-light. That works, though. It works. Hammer brings it every single time. And you know what? All the main characters...
The only thing that...
Fantastic.
Costuming that was not rare, was just a little bit off, was the snakes on the head.
Okay, but let's talk about what works. Because, yeah, clearly what does not work is the Medusa head type thing with the snakes. And again, I have another behind the scenes thing about that, though. But let's talk about what works. What outside of our common Hammer films things really stands out as working?
The actor.
Yeah, the acting is just top notch.
Top notch. Well, you said the costumes were... Really I like that even the small details, as Dr. Nemiroff was cutting up the head, he had spots of blood
Yeah.
on his white lab coat.
Yeah, it's a little attention to detail. I will say a standout thing, honestly, is Patrick Troughton. I have not seen him in other things outside of Doctor Who. I freaking loved seeing him as a villain in this, and as a villain that actually he had presence as
And
like this kind of nasty inspector.
I wouldn't say anyone was a villain. I would say they were pseudo villains.
Oh, everyone that's covering up everything in this town are villains.
So that's almost every character besides
Meister and the Heightses.
And the Heights.
And Sasha, who was killed right at the beginning of the film.
Well, she had so little part. That would be like putting Hans, which is the professor.
Are you thinking of like Ratoff?
Ratoff was a villain.
Yeah.
Hans was the butler or the manservant for Paul.
Oh, sure. For Heights, for the Heights. Professor Heights, the father.
Yeah.
See, the problem is that there were many Heightses in this movie. I actually appreciated the art that was on the wall, not because it was nudity, but because it was original. It was clearly original art. Some of the paintings were not originally made for this movie, but I want to say like the sketchings were for this movie because it looks like the actress who played Sasha.
But there
were like more well-known paintings in there.
There was paintings. Some of them were impressions, some were something else.
But it might have been just that Heights collecting artwork too.
That's the only thing I could think.
And I'm fine with that. I really liked the use of lighting in this film. I think it actually stands out. And there's like moments where it's just very, very cool. And it's when it's close to sundown or sunrise, and you have these like low lights being used of like orange with orange gels that are like shining, and the matte paintings, like there's like that one scene where it's dark, but you can see the light just off in the distance of the sun is just barely lighting the sky, and they put the proper gels, and I think it just worked really well. It seems like that's something that would be like, no duh, of course they're going to do that. But
there was a day for night shot, but it was
well
done in the morning, I believe.
I think it was done before technical sunrise, or if it was after sunrise, it was done at with like a cloudy day, so you didn't get like the super blue skies or anything like that. It looked very well done. So most Hammer films, most of it works. It's actually really well done. So what doesn't work, we've already mentioned the snake wig. The snake wig was actually pretty poorly done for a Hammer film. If you were talking about a standard 1950s or 60s American science fiction movie, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
But for a Hammer, no.
I have a little bit of a higher standard for Hammer films. Now, the behind-the-scenes thing about that was Barbara Shelley, who played Carla, also wanted to play the Gorgon. And she was told no. And supposedly she also had the idea of how to make the wig and to use live green snakes that were only just loosely tied into it. So even if they bit her, big deal, because they're just like garden snakes. But and all the shots that you need to have the Gorgon there are going to be so brief that even if they got out of the ties that you would put them in, it's fine. You're going to get your shot.
That's kind of cruel.
Yes, but you're not harming them. Like, yeah, you're just holding them in place for a moment, because it's not like you're having 1,000 green snakes on your head. Like, she didn't want that. She said, we can do this with like 7 snakes. And that's what they did with the actual prop that they used here. It's like it has 7 snakes on it or something like that. Like, hey, I just need a few snakes. That's it. And they're not going to be hurt. And the director and producer are like, no, that's too expensive. And after the film was finished, they're like, you're right, we should have done what you asked. We should have had you as the Gorgon and used your idea with the green snakes, like the garden snakes. Because, yeah, wouldn't have that been far more effective, like real snakes coiling on her head? Like, far more effective. That would have been, like, unsettling good.
But they wouldn't have been pointing at the people.
No, You wouldn't have been able to get them to do that. That's fair. But it could have been done with her own eyes. Like the glaring of her eyes. Like, that's just acting, right? We don't have Harryhausen doing the Medusa effect from like Clash of the Titans here. You don't need that.
You probably could have actually done the Kirk light on the eyes too.
Exactly, Kirk lighter eyes. And that would have worked just as well as having the snakes like focusing on somebody.
And probably change the eyes to glowing green.
So the wig is something that did not work. The plot is confusing at points. I have to actually say
you had to figure out that they were jumping
months. But you only figure that out at the end, really, that they're jumping months, that there's actually months occurring.
Even though they put the full moon up there, there's 3 days of full moon.
Yeah, you think that there's going to be other... anyway, so the plot's confusing. I don't know if I can say it doesn't work, because the plot is still interesting, but it's confusing. I have to kind of put it in our category of bad, right?
But they did do something that the last few movies haven't. You introduced the characters by their names a lot of times, except for the first two. Yeah,
well, I heard that it was like Bruno. That's Bruno. I didn't hear about Sasha until the next scene.
Yeah, Sasha
he did say it.
Sasha called him Bruno.
Yeah, Bruno a few times. And he did say her name was Sasha. It's just that it was one time. And here's the thing. Those two characters, after the first scene, they're gone anyway. You don't need to know about them. Now, everybody else gets their names used over and over and over again. And it's really easy to remember them, except for the fact that a lot of times the Heightses are all referred to as Mr. Heights. And
Professor
you're like,
Heights and Heights.
Wait a second. Which Heights is this? Oh, that's Paul. That's so-and-so. Anyway, that's Paul. That's Jules. Heights is the professor. Paul's the character that goes all the way through this for most of the movie. Is there anything else that you think really does not work in this? Honestly, it's a Hammer film, right? Like, I did not watch many Hammer films growing up. I didn't. I'll be honest. Like, I don't think I've seen any of these Hammer films that we've watched so far. And every one of them has actually been very entertaining, and I've really enjoyed them. For their time, they're excellent movies. And I think they're still good. Would you still call them horror movies? I guess so. Would you consider
they're just classic horror?
They're classic horror, and they still hold
British
up well today.
Classic horror.
I feel they still hold up today because they have
because there's something different between British classic horror and American classic horror.
Yes, like all these Hammer films have a feel to them that makes them feel like.
Sometimes it's just the lighting that they do. Like when they walk into that castle, yeah, it's dilapidated. It's that, but it's the lights that are just here and there and
that are highlighting things in a certain way. Yeah, it's so well done. Every one of these has been, folks. Like, even if we haven't reviewed one of Hammer films yet, just check them out. Like if you come across a Hammer film to watch, and you realize it's a Hammer film. Watch it. Just watch it. And you'll see what we're talking about, like this quality of film, like the film stock, how
the
it's
coloring
lit.
Is great.
Yeah, how it's lit, how the makeup is done, how like the costuming, the attention to detail in it, sets, it all just like Darlene, did you notice the use of stained glass in this movie?
Yes.
How it lit people differently depending on where they were in the house because of the stained glass that was on the window? Like, holy crap, who would do that? That's fantastic. Like, okay, today you'd probably just literally have a stained glass there.
It also told you what time of the day it was.
Yeah, by the angle of the sun. Exactly. It's little pieces of detail.
Because the sun was coming through at night through those stained glass. And they did not make it during the morning that it did that.
Yes.
Because the morning one, the sun was coming through the other window and it was lighter.
Yes. I mean, attention to detail. It's attention to detail, and then you have this star power that's in almost all of these Hammer films. That obviously Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, they have.
But they made their stuff a lot. Hammer probably made them
as famous as they were. Yeah, of course. This is how they got their names. But the reason why they're so famous from these Hammer films is that they have that magnetism. They have that charisma. They have the actual acting chops to pull this off. So let's wrap this up. Do we recommend this?
Yes.
Yes. Now, I think this is one of the weaker Hammer films that we've watched, just because the plot is a little confusing, but I still recommend it. I think it's a good movie. I think it's a good movie even for modern times, which is crazy. Because you know what? I'm so used to modern movies and TV shows having utter crap plots that this isn't that bad.
I like that you had to figure some things out for yourself, too.
Yeah.
They weren't told to you, including that the full moon, when it was repairing, it was a whole month later.
Yeah.
You had to figure that out.
Yeah. I think there's two pieces that could have probably been cleared up a little bit in this movie and made it better. And that's what, like, the full moon thing is, like, that there's been months passing. Like, I think that should have been pointed out. Like, the cop, when he comes in, like, Patrick Troughton comes in later on, he should have said, "You've been here for a month, you haven't found anything, we want you out." Like, that would, a very short line, and you would have gone, "Oh, okay, there's time scale here. There's time scales." That didn't happen. I wish it did. That's my only, like...
Drop a blunt hit.
Yeah.
Instead of the small, tiny hints.
Yes, and so that would be my one thing a modern filmmaker should take away from this film is, if you're trying to tell a story that takes place over a long period of time, put little hints in there. A little more than little hints. Because it might not be clear at times. Like, when you, in your final edit, if you're seeing, oh, it's not really clear that all this time is passing, go back and ADR something in that's like, hey, you've been here for a month, and then go into the regular line.
Don't write the thing that it went past this time.
Or
that's kind of annoying.
1 month later or something like that. No, come on, that's crap. That's crap. That's lazy. So, thanks for listening again, folks. Now, for the next episode's actually episode 115. What should we do, Darlene? I'm putting you on the spot.
I'm thinking about going back to that
115.
The old Dark Horse from 1932.
Dark House.
Dark House.
Can we find it? Do we know that we're going to be able to do it?
I don't know. That's for you to find out.
Oh, it's for me to find out. Otherwise, what are we going to do?
I don't know.
How about Frankenstein?
How about...
since we've done Dracula.
What's the big ape?
King Kong. What's the big ape?
The big ape.
I don't know. Mighty Joe Young, Darlene. Yeah, that's the other answer. But no, King Kong. Sure, we could do King Kong. We could do King Kong as well. But I don't know. We'll figure it out. We don't know. We're gonna surprise everybody with our 115. I have ideas. You have ideas. We'll figure it out. So I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene. Good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.